Welcome to the Cold Blooded Caffeine Podcast. I'm your host, Trey.
And I am McKendrick.
And we are back from a little bit of a hiatus. Self-inflicted hiatus. Well, unintentionally. We had to take a break because we had some technical difficulty with some of our equipment. Our main editing computer went down, which made it kind of hard to edit the podcasts or any videos or anything like that. So we were kind of forced to take a break.
Yeah, which kind of sucked.
It was. We felt like I felt like we were kind of in a groove with the videos finally, and then it goes down. It was a brand new desktop, so fortunately it was taken care of by the company. But still, we had to wait like 2 weeks to ship it out and then get it back. So yeah, I don't know if that was a doo-doo.
No, I was looking for. No. Okay, I quit.
Okay. No, that's it. He's out of practice.
I'm out of practice.
Give him a break. Give him a break.
Let me see.
There we go. That's the one. So yeah, but in the meantime, I mean, we've been keeping busy. So we've been St. Louis was a week and a half ago now.
Yeah, we've done local shows here in the Charleston area.
Yeah, so staying busy.
Local events, I should say local events.
And now we're rolling right up into Thanksgiving. So this is the week of Thanksgiving into Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So stay tuned. You'll be seeing, if it's not out already before this podcast, you'll see some announcements coming out for Black Friday sales.
Gotta have a good Black Friday deal for the people.
Right. So stay tuned for that. Check out Instagram and Facebook for all that good stuff. But yeah, so coming up on the end of the year, it's crazy that 2023 is almost gone.
Almost gone, man. We'll be in 2024 before you know it. But it's been a good ride this year. It's been very busy.
It's almost the tale of 2 years, right? Like year one of Cold Blooded Caffeine, 2022, like that was the first full year.
Right.
And looking back on that, it was so much different. And so far, seeing how far we've come in 2023, like in the new facility, we had the delivery business. It's really, and we probably should do a recap episode at the end, kind of like talking about all the changes
like this year.
Happened. Yeah.
So 2023 recap. That's probably a good idea.
That'll be nice. But just to say that it's almost completely different. Like looking at 2022 versus 2023, completely different. So, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. Today, we got a request, and it was a good idea to talk about. I think it was a direct message, or maybe a comment on one of the previous videos, to talk about more detail about how we got started coffee roasting and kind of the decisions that we made, the journey from the beginning to where we are now. And as I said, a lot of things have changed over the past 2 years, including the equipment that we use to roast, where we roast, and kind of our mindset behind roasting.
The equipment we use to record podcasts.
The equipment that may or may not have been stolen. Well, okay, so it was given to us. It depends on. It was loaned to us.
That I think that is the right word that we should use.
It was loaned. Well, at what point does the loan become stolen if we just don't give it back?
Well, and if they don't ever listen to a podcast,
if they don't ever ask for it back, is it my obligation to give it back?
I mean, they know the address where it's at, so to me that's good enough. It'll be here.
It'll be here. It doesn't leave this building, so that's fair. All right, so good. I feel better about it.
That said, though, there have been a lot of changes, over the last 12 months or so, and just thinking back to where we started and how we started. I mean, I guess, man, how far do we go back when we're telling this story?
Well, let's start at the beginning. So with the assumption that that we're coffee roasters, so we're not going to go through the details of how we became interested in coffee, because I mean that's just going to take forever and ever. But we're going to talk about a little bit more about the decision of when we decided to start a coffee roasting company. How did we get from I want to start a coffee company to where we are today?
Right.
And so kind of the first decision that we had to make was whether we roast or not.
Right.
Whether we roast or whether we buy.
Right. And once we decided coffee, that was like, okay, all right, this makes sense. We can do it. We can make it happen. So we ended up basically going through a process of trying to figure out, did it make sense to like white label it?
Right.
Or because the original thought was that we would do something that would that would
it's supplemental,
bring extra income,
right.
Supplemental, right? But not necessarily take up a lot of time.
I think that's the caveat that we put in. The intention of when we decided to start a business was not to go full time into that. It
was
business.
not. It was not. So
at that time,
at
right?
the time, yeah.
So at that time, when we recognized there was space in the market for a niche, like branded reptile and amphibian wildlife conservation coffee, it was never intended to go full time.
Right.
So the idea of white labeling makes sense when you didn't want to dedicate your full resources to producing, following all of the hurdles that it would take to operate a roastery full time.
Right.
But
yeah,
go ahead and tell us about how that process went.
So we researched several companies, really coast to coast, just trying to find what would make sense if we were going to go down the white label process. And white labeling is ultimately finding someone like a private labeling, right?
It is.
It's ultimately finding someone who does the work, but you have a name or a brand that you want to use on that product to represent you. And when we went down that path and started sampling some of the coffees that were out there, it became a little bit of a stretch to say, put my name and brand on this when it really wasn't or didn't meet the standards that we thought it should.
We weren't happy with the end product, right? And the lack of control over the quality of the product bothered me. Like not being able to see the product. Like I wasn't going to open a bag and test it every time before I shipped it to a customer, right?
Right.
So I was trusting that manufacturer to put as much detail into it as I would, and trusting it to go out the door to a customer where when them trying to put their best foot forward, I would assume, and sending us samples were not good enough.
Right. Because even if we thought that, they were doing their part to make sure a good product went out the door, the one thing you would expect is when you're sending out a sample to someone, that's probably going to be one of your best products.
Right.
You're going to send your absolute best to get someone sold or hooked on a product. And when you're doing that via the sampling process, you're expecting the best. And the reality is it just wasn't good.
Yeah, it just wasn't good.
It wasn't good.
So we didn't want to put our name on it. So that kind of threw us for a loop, right? So we went from the decision. It was either at that point, the conversation of scrapping the whole idea or doing it ourselves.
But we knew we had a very unique niche, right? No one else was doing this type of work in this segment, and it would have been foolish to just walk away.
Right. We saw the potential. We had done the math to get to that point, right? So we had done a business plan to get to that point to determine market viability and future growth and things like that. And so at that point, we made the decision to go into the roasting route because, and I think that probably the biggest reason why I felt comfortable doing that is that I had kind of started in the meantime, even though we thought we were going to private label, I had been messing around with home roasting just a little bit, just kind of to help improve my knowledge of coffee and the process, because I'm the type of person that I really want to know how everything works. And so to sell a product that I didn't understand how it worked would have driven me crazy. And so that's why I started with the home roasting side. And that's also what gave me a frame of reference when we looked at the samples that were coming in to say, like, the coffee that I'm making at home with like no experience is better than the coffee samples that we're getting.
Right.
And that was the catalyst to say, all right, maybe we should do this ourselves and take control of that quality. And so we did. And so, I brought something out here. It usually kind of sits up at the top. So if you've watched any videos in the past, it sits up here, but this was my first ever coffee roaster that I used to make coffee at home.
So this was before what we have now is two roasters, but this was like the origin.
This is the origin. So this is the first coffee roaster that I ever got. This is a Fresh Roast SR 800. It is a little air roaster. So this is actually the chaff collector for those of you that know coffee and coffee roasting. This is the chaff collector. Here, you can take that. This is the main cylinder where the coffee beans go, and then there's actually a fan and a heating element down here in the bottom that blows that hot air through that cylinder, and that's what roasts the coffee. So I roasted coffee on this. I learned to roast coffee on this for 6 months or so before we even talked about starting a coffee roasting company. Let me get this all back together.
And we still have in our archive some of the first beans.
It's actually right here
from those roasts back in the day.
And this little flask right there, that was actually the beans from my first ever roast. Because I kind of kept them because I was impressed with the first roast, and I was like, man, it could be something special to have in the future. So I'm glad I kept them.
Yep.
So yeah, I remember roasting because this thing has no automation. It's completely manual. And of course it produces a lot of smoke when you roast. So you can't really roast inside with this thing unless you have like a range or something that you can
to ventilate
out. I don't have that at my house. And so I remember sitting out on the back porch in the back patio, and it was almost probably about this time of year when I was learning to roast on it. November, December. I remember starting to get cold. We're in Charleston, South Carolina, so don't judge me.
Relative.
Yeah, when I say it was cold, but I mean it was probably into the 40s, and I was sitting outside trying to roast coffee with my little logbook, trying to track rate of rise and first crack and all the timing and things of roasting. And so it's a fun memory to think back, learning to roast. And I'm glad I did it that way, honestly, because it taught me how to roast instead of relying on like roast curves and other aspects of automation that our newer and more fancier equipment have. I know and understand it better because I learned on this manual machine where I was in control and I had to manipulate and I had to make all the changes. So that was the first roaster that we ever used. And honestly, we actually sold some of that coffee. So we actually gave some of that coffee away to family and friends and things like that we were roasting off of this. But probably I think the first show that we ever did, we brought some bags to Columbia. I don't even know if you remember that. It was, and they were the white bags just like this.
Yep.
Those are some early bags. We don't use those bags anymore. But we brought some bags with us to sell at a show, whereas coffee was not the main part of the setup.
Right.
And those bags were roasted on this little coffee roaster right here. And that coffee, the one that I just had out, it'll do about 6 ounces of coffee at a time.
Wow.
So it was 2 roasts to get one bag.
Wow.
And so that was work. That's why I was sitting out there for several hours
good old days. Wow.
every night roasting coffee to try and get enough to bring 10 bags to a show. Clearly, that was not a long-term strategy, right?
But it gave you the experience and understanding of just the roasting process.
It gave me a couple of things. It gave me the experience and it gave me repetitions, right? So I roasted a lot of coffee, a lot of roasts for a very little amount of coffee, but I roasted a lot of roasts in a short period of time. And so I got to learn about roasting coffee pretty quickly instead of just roasting once a week for my own use or something like that. Right.
Right.
So that's the first roaster. And then we had to make a decision, right? Because we knew that this wasn't the long-term solution. And so we had to decide where we went from there.
Right. And then, but ultimately, right, so we knew we needed a larger roaster.
We knew we needed a larger roaster.
And of course, we didn't go all in at first. We still stepped up to the 1 kilogram.
No, we went, the second roaster that we got was the big one.
Was it the big one?
It was. Yeah. Because we sat in the car one day and we were trying to calculate. So that was the decision that we had to make, right? Because you have a lot of factors that go into it, right?
I remember this.
You have a lot of different factors that go into determining the size of roaster that you need.
Well, but even before that, though, we were talking about even location of where to put it, right?
Right. That's one consideration. That's what I was getting into. Is so you have a couple of different things. One is you can be limited on the size of the roaster by where you're going to end up putting it.
Right.
At my house, I can't put a 6 kilogram or larger roaster, right? Because, I mean, if you've watched any of our videos with the roaster, a 6 kilogram roaster in terms of like commercial roasters is not that big, right? There's roasters that are a lot bigger,
right?
But that 6 kilogram roaster is probably, I don't know, 8 foot long, 4 foot wide, at least,
and then all the piping,
and then all the venting and everything, and it wasn't.
And it's what, 900 pounds?
Oh, it's heavy. Yeah.
So yeah.
And to put something like that in your garage or at your house, and the amount of smoke it produces and things like that, it just isn't feasible to do something like that. So we had to make a decision on location, right? So I was roasting at my house with the little guy,
small
of course. Was that something that we continued to do? And if that was the case, we needed to go with something small, or do we have an alternate location that we could go step up larger? Luckily for us, we did have access to a secondary location.
Yep.
The unfortunate side of that was that it was about an hour away from where we both live, and so we had to travel. The good thing is it was rent free.
This is true.
And so that was why we made it work. Yeah. So we weren't charged any rent. It was actually some family of mine. So thanks, Nana, if you watch this video.
I miss those biscuits.
Yeah, we do miss the biscuits. Actually, she had Thanksgiving last week, and I got some biscuits. I didn't bring any back for you because there weren't any left.
I'm not surprised.
But biscuits. So we roasted at a location about an hour outside of where we both live, and we did that for February to December.
Yeah, almost a year.
Yeah. So we did that for almost a year. So that was the reason why we could get a 6 kilogram roaster. One of the reasons why we had a location where we could support a 6 kilogram roaster. So that's, to me, the first consideration is location. And it's really difficult because going into coffee roasting, making the decision of whether you go full time or not, is going to dictate a lot of that as well, right? Because if you're buying a 6 kilogram roaster, you're investing quite a substantial amount of money. You need to recoup that. In order to recoup that money, you almost have to work full time to do it, right? Because you have to produce enough coffee off of that machine to cover the cost. So it's kind of a catch-22 there, right? So the more you invest, the more you have to roast, the more customers you need to make that money back to be able to do it.
But we still slow rolled into it.
We slow rolled into it, right? So we had to put in that money in advance,
correct?
Knowing we made the decision, knowing that we were okay not making that money back for, I think we said 3 years, that we wouldn't recoup the cost of that machine for 3 years,
right?
As a business investment, right? Not to say that we weren't going to make any money, in that,
right? But we weren't going to make the money to make the cash back that we put into that, right?
So we knew that, and we were okay with that. It's going to depend on your individual situation whether that is the best decision for you, and that's going to be the theme kind of throughout this, is to say, this is our path, but it may not always be the best path for you,
because everyone's financial situation may be a little bit different. Having access to property or land that you can afford to do something like we did, regardless if it's coffee or any type of business, right? You gotta, take those things into consideration. We were fortunate enough, like we didn't at the time need, like commercial deliveries, right? We were going to pick up coffee beans and bringing them back to our location,
right,
in order to do roasting, which is different when we got into the delivery service.
Right.
We had to get deliveries, and they would only deliver to commercial addresses.
Right.
So that became a change that came later on in the process. Yeah. That was something else that needed to be considered. So depending on the type of business that you're looking at, you also have to look at, if it's commercially zoned, commercial address, and if you need something delivered. For us, like I said, luckily we were able to pick the coffee up and like bags and stuff for ease, and we could just order those.
Or if you need inspections. So depending on your state, in South Carolina, we're in South Carolina, is pretty lenient with coffee. It starts to get into when you're selling to businesses directly that you need some additional inspections that take place. But regardless, make sure there's a lot of factors to consider when you're looking at locations, whether you need, like you said, deliveries that require commercial addresses, inspections from government agencies, business licenses, like a lot of like business, if you're in a subdivision, the HOA is going to have restrictions on whether you can operate a business in that subdivision, and therefore you cannot get issued a business license for those locations. So there's a lot that goes into it. So keep that in mind as you go through it. But make sure that you open yourself up to options. Like we looked at so many different options. We looked at sheds. We looked at trailers. We looked at buses. We looked at.
I feel like we were just pulling over on the side of the road every time we saw space available here. Yeah. Oh, let's go see
everywhere.
Yeah, we looked everywhere.
And so we ended up staying at the location, our first location, for about a year. One, because it was free rent, and two, because it was very difficult to find a location. So keep that in mind if you're going to start a coffee roasting company, is that not every building is going to want you to install a smokestack out of the back of your building.
Although the smell could be much better than some of the surroundings.
It can.
Like we came into a situation like, I don't know, they're doing some tree stuff on the backside.
Yeah, there's a paper mill. Well, it's a lumber processing, but it's for the paper mill in Charleston. Right. But they process all the lumber, and so it smells like Christmas trees sometimes, but it's definitely a pungent smell.
Yes.
And so that worked out for us pretty well because the coffee, it's actually a very nice smell.
Yeah.
But you might not want it next to, I don't know. I can't even think of
coffee smell and something else that would be combined and makes it bad. Like,
I don't know. But I mean, we did have trouble finding a location. And we feel very fortunate. Like, I don't know if it could have ended any better with where we ended up.
Yeah. I mean, there was a few locations that I thought could have been really solid, but again, you got to make sure people understand what you're doing and make sure they're willing to accept, the smoke and the smell that comes with it. And not everyone was. So not everyone's a coffee fan. So
location we
found was good.
So location is a big thing to consider when you're looking at stepping up to the next level, right? So to recap that first section, I absolutely, if you're interested in starting coffee roasting, start small. Like, start with something, because repetition is going to be very, very important. So get you a machine. I mean, this SR 500, 800, whatever the thing is great. I don't think it's the end all be all of beginning home roasters. Honestly, I think probably like the Aleo Bullet, which is what we got, the kind of third roaster that we got, the 1 kilogram electric roaster that we have, is a tremendous and, in the grand scheme of things, fairly affordable roaster that can do a lot of things. So if you're looking at starting a coffee roasting business, the Aleo Bullet is a great place to start. I know I've talked to several people from YouTube that have commented on videos or direct messages that have the Bullet as a home roaster or as a beginning coffee roasting business roaster. And I think that's a great decision. There's many others out there though. So if you can't, we're still talking about, between $2,000 and $3,000 for an Aleo Bullet. So it's not in everybody's budget. I get that. So get what you can afford, but repetition for me up front is more important than getting the highest quality piece of equipment or the biggest thing up front.
I mean, and I think it's good to have a multitude of roasting options, right? Like, you don't want to go in and be like, I'm gonna get one big roaster and that's gonna be it, right? I mean, you need something. You're gonna need options.
Yeah, right? So you're gonna need to think that through, right? So you're gonna need some sort of sample roaster. You can't really afford to not have it. Some sort of sample roaster.
Yeah, because otherwise you're gonna just be over roasting like
or you're not going to be able to quality
batches.
control or anything like that, right? So you're going to definitely need a sample roaster. So keep that in mind. But there's also the catch-22 of you don't want to like step up too much. Like you don't want to go from a 1 kilogram to a 3 to a 5 to a 6 to a 10 because you're going to be spending money unnecessarily, right? So there is a lot of thought that needs to go into it. But for us, we have a 1 kilogram and a 6 kilogram, and I think that does great for us. Because we can sample roast down on the 1 kilogram if we need to, or we can roast full batches on the 1 kilogram and get about 2 bags of coffee if we want to do like e-commerce orders or like one-off orders or something like that. And then anything bigger than that, we can step up to the 6 kilogram. So location was a reason why we chose what we did, because we had the space. We had at the location, the first location, we had almost, I'm going to say unlimited space, but like in terms of space, we did not need the size of the roaster was not constrained by the space.
No, not at all.
And so
that was easily 500, 700 square feet.
Probably, yeah, at least.
Yeah.
Just of where we could put the roaster. There was actually some additional like office area space that we had. But just like quote warehousing space where we could put green coffee and the roaster was at least I would say probably bigger than 500 square feet. But yeah, so that location is one key reason why we picked the roaster that we did and how we got to where we are. Probably another important factor is like return on investment or like sustainability of the business, right? So we did calculations of how much money did we need to make in order to sustain the business and provide us a salary, right? So if we calculated the whole, like if we said, okay, I'm making up numbers here, but if we're going to charge $15 a bag and we're going to make $7 a bag profit after all the bills are paid, how much $7 do we need to make?
Right. In order
to have a location, in order to keep the lights on, in order to pay us a salary, in order to pay employees eventually. And so that's how we kind of worked our way back in determining, okay, well, I can't get a 1 kilogram roaster because we're 2 people. And I can't rely on just a 1 kilogram roaster.
Right.
Because we're 2 people, we want to make a salary. If I run that 1 kilogram roaster for 8 hours a day, full go.
What's the most
money that I could possibly make? And it did not meet the requirements of what we needed out of the business, right?
Right. Well,
just to put it bluntly, right? I mean, it's And so going in and looking at it as a business and saying, okay, I don't want to buy a roaster every year as I grow,
right? Because
if you look at the pricing of roasters, from 0 to 1 kilogram on a lot of like your commercial roasters. I'm not talking about the Aleo Bullet, which is kind of like that hybrid home roaster / commercial roaster. But if you look at a propane or a natural gas drum roaster, commercial drum roaster, from 0 to 1 is probably one of the bigger gaps. You're getting like you're going to get into it in like the $10,000 range, right?
Right.
And then you jump up kind of slow, like okay, maybe it's like
you're not going to jump
10 to 14,
right?
Right.
You're not going to jump for your another next one, 10,000,
and then 10 to 14 to 16 or something like that. And so doing the math, it kind of made sense. We were going between 3 and 6 to be perfectly transparent. A 3 kilogram versus a 6 kilogram. And we ended up going with the 6 kilogram because it gave us, we thought we could get by with the 3 kilogram. The math, but we could see where we could quickly, we could quickly reach the capacity. And very thankful that we did, because right now, I mean, just with what we've got, and we certainly have ambitions to grow a lot larger, a 3 kilogram would not meet during our peak times.
Right. And then the one thing you don't want to do is you get yourself stuck behind like a 3 kilogram and it's like, all right, I do need another one, but I may not need a 6, or I should have bought a 6, so I'm going to buy another 3. That it doesn't make sense, right? Because it doesn't make sense. Again, you're one person, right?
Right, so, because 3 plus 3 doesn't equal 6.
Right. It does not. Not
because then you're adding another employee,
right?
And that's taking away.
Or you could have just been doing both at one time. Yeah. Back and forth, back and forth.
Don't
back
do
and
that.
forth,
Don't
back
do
and
that.
forth. Just start one every 6 minutes. Sounds easy.
It sounds easy. You got 5 of them in a line. Just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, then you start them every 2 minutes.
Don't
boom,
do that.
Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so agree. We did the math, just making sure it made sense. Like, and you know, knowing where we were and where we wanted to be.
And knowing
really,
what our budget was. Like, knowing what we could afford.
Right. And, you know, how we wanted to pay ourselves once the business grew. And, like, once we saw what the maximum could be in a day, in an 8-hour day, you know, of course, we had to also look at things like the bottlenecks within the business just to see, because roasting is just one part of it, right? So although you may be able to roast, you know, 36 bags an hour, you may not be able to pack, seal, grind 36 bags an hour.
Yeah.
So you have to start looking at those things as well, because there could be other bottlenecks in your business. But, you know, we did the math of what made sense for us to make sure that in the long run, we were profitable. We were able to take a salary. We are able to hire employees, all when the timing is right. Not putting ourselves in a position that we can max out with a 3-kilogram roaster, but we can't hire anybody. Right. So we wanted to make sure we did all those calculations and just make it make sense based on what we put into it.
Yeah. So, and so that's why we landed on the 6 kilogram. And so that's why I would recommend people, if you are looking to go into a roasting business as a full-time, you know, investment, I don't see how you can get away with using a roaster that's less than 6.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's some options, 5 to 6 kilograms.
If you're going to do it, I agree. I was just going to say, like, trying to think, if you were just planning to do it by yourself, like you never intend to hire employees, you just want to roast, pack, ship everything by yourself,
I still think you're going to hit a maximum.
You're
like
hit a ceiling?
I still think you're going to hit a ceiling, because even more so in that situation, because you're gonna roast for a day and then pack for a day, and then you're gonna. So what I would say in that situation, because what we've learned is that roasting isn't our bottleneck.
Correct. It's
even at this point,
you can sit at that roaster all day roasting, but
I can't pack it.
You can't pack it. Like there's
and that's what we do right now. What your scenario, what we talked about is,
right.
I do the roasting and the packing right now.
Right.
And I can roast faster than I can pack.
Yep.
And so I would recommend in that case even doing the opposite. Like if you're going to be a solo roaster, get even bigger of a roaster so you could roast once a day, one time a week,
and then
pack
just work
the rest
on packing.
Right.
Right.
So that you can, yeah. I mean, there's ways that you can do it, but
yeah.
Regardless, I don't think that you can get by with less than a 6 kilogram. If I were to do it again, I might even have gone to a 10. Like in my mind, if I know what I knew now, I might have even gone to a 10. But I'm very happy with the 6 that we have.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's probably the 2 biggest reasons is location, and then location, 3 reasons: location, budget, and understanding what your goals are as a roaster.
Right. Right.
If you're a roaster cafe, you might be able to do less. You might be able to get by with a 3 kilogram if you're not trying to sell e-commerce or to other cafes. Where you're not, like, if you're trying to support multiple cafes, you're going to have volume. But if you're a roaster cafe, if you're going to roast your own coffee for your cafe, you might be able to get by with a 1 or a 3 kilogram. Just know that you're going to limit your capacity if you ever want to grow or sell outside of your own cafe. But still, I think there are multiple options depending on what you want in your situation. But just be thoughtful of that as you go into it. So now we get to the third roaster that we purchased as a business. And this one came out of a couple of different things. So we got the 6 kilogram, and we got it set up about an hour away from us.
Right.
Which was great. We already talked about it, free rent, but it also had its unique set of challenges. It also known as one-off e-commerce orders, right? So
the big roaster
easily
could hammer out large orders. Like, oh man, run that roaster.
If we had an event,
4 or 8 hours,
like a show or something, or
fire
if
it
we
up.
had a big project or something like that we had a lot of orders come in, easy peasy,
but
take care of it.
When we had
one bag
order, which is a lot of what we ultimately got, right? We got a lot of customers
because we started even still. We've actually limited it a little bit recently, but we actually started out with a large number of products.
Right.
And so like it would have been easier in retrospect to have one or two products.
That way, when
you could roast when you got orders in, but we would get one-off orders, and we had to make the decision of whether we would wait to fulfill those orders when we had more orders come in, or whether we would drive an hour to roast essentially one bag. We would have extra, but we would have to roast one bag extra, and then come back. Right. So there was a lot of time wasted, which of course our time is our money. And so therefore we were losing money almost when we
got one-off order.
So to counter that, we got the Aleo Bullet, the 1 kilogram electric roaster, which we could keep at my house.
Right.
So that got us by on orders. Oh, I could do a lot on those. I roasted for a long time, almost exclusively on that roaster.
Well, but when you got a lot of the one-off order,
until we would do big shows. Right.
Then we fire up the...
So when we had the Snake Discovery video that came out, we used the big roaster.
Yep.
And when we roast for
every show,
we would use the big roaster. But everything else, all the e-commerce orders, all the local orders and stuff like that, for the first year or so were roasted on the Aleo Bullet, because it was at my house upstairs.
And it was easy to get to.
I would just go walk upstairs and roast.
Right.
The caveat there to keep in mind again is that your neighbors may think your house is on fire, because that has happened. That did happen once or twice. Is that I had neighbors come over and knock on the door asking if everybody was okay because there was smoke coming out of my upstairs window.
Well, I mean, good neighbors.
But
know your homeowners association rules, right?
Know your homeowners association rules. You might even want to let your neighbors know if they get a smell that it's coffee.
It's a good courtesy to kind of cue them in a little bit.
But that's why we ended up getting the third one. So the third roaster was one for sample roasting, because I tried to use, in my ignorance, I tried to use this guy, the one that I had earlier. I tried to use it as a sample roaster, and the lack of control and the lack of gauges or any like temperature and everything. And I know people sample roast on a lot of stuff. It wasn't for me. I didn't feel confident with my consistency being able to roast repeatably for a sample roast on that roaster. And so that was one of the reasons why we got the 1 kilogram Aleo Bullet, but also being able to roast small batch.
Yeah.
So that would be also my suggestion would be to set aside enough funds for, if you can, for a larger roaster and then a smaller roaster.
Yeah.
So instead of maybe if you had enough to get a 10 kilogram, get a 1 and a 6 instead.
Because that was my point earlier. I say I don't know how we would survive without having the inventory of both of these.
Yeah.
Right. Like you need both pieces of equipment,
and I still use both. I use
every week.
I use the 6 kilogram a lot more than what we just talked about. So, like I said, we've pared down a little bit of our product offerings. We do a lot more pre-orders and limited runs and things like that, where we have large quantities of e-commerce orders that come in at one time where I can roast one thing over and over again. And then we do a lot more bigger shows where I can use the 6 kilogram. But I still use the 1 kilogram a lot. And so, yeah, I definitely would recommend it. We have not outgrown either one yet. And we've still got some capacity on both of them.
Both, yeah.
If we need it. But again, keep in mind that I'm the only one roasting. So I can't run both of them at the same time.
Correct.
So
unless you
no, don't give the people bad ideas.
Okay. Nope, you can't run both of them at the same time.
So I think that might sum up the coffee journey? Is there anything else? I'm trying to think of what I would want to know if it were me.
I mean, I think that kind of seals it, man. I mean, those are the things that were the most important things and decisions that we had to make from the beginning of this journey until now, and how we still operate the business today.
And there's no right or wrong answer, right? I think if you go into it with rational thought and analysis, and not just a gut reaction of, oh, this is what my favorite YouTuber has, I need to get this. You'll be fine. Make it as a business decision, even if you're not planning on running it as a business long term. Even if you just want something that you can sell to your friends or family or at a farmer's market or whatever.
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's at the end of the day, that's what you got to do. Like, don't go into it without doing some level of analysis to understand the investment going in, the return coming back, how long it's going to take. You should always have that. You should always be doing that level of analysis month to month. Like, we still do monthly reports, right? Just looking at data, understanding, money in, money out, customers, shipments. I would say just don't go into it ad hoc just because, I can afford, whatever, $30,000 roaster. Like, no, do the analysis and see what makes sense.
And keep in mind also that the roaster is only a small part of the overall investment and the overall time in running the business. So we've pretty exclusively talked about roasting because that's what most people are interested in asking us, is how we got started in roasting. But keep in mind that you cannot use a residential coffee grinder to grind your coffee for your customers. It's going to burn out in a heartbeat, right? So you're going to need commercial grinders. You're going to need a sealer. You're going to need if you're chasing your bottlenecks, probably one of the pieces of equipment that I think captures that the best in what we've purchased is that weigh fill machine. So we took hands down. We took the bottleneck of filling bags and eliminated it completely, right?
Yep.
And by using a weigh fill machine. But I mean, you're talking about that's $2,000. That's a $3,500 grinder. That's a $1,000 sealer. That's and all this stuff adds up. So keep in mind as you go through it that spending all of your budget on a roaster, even though we said, okay, split it between a 6 kilogram and a 1 kilogram or whatever, get 2 roasters. You also have to keep in mind that you're going to need a commercial grinder. You don't have to have a weigh fill machine. You don't have to have a vertical band sealer, but all of those things are to help keep the production moving and to not create bottlenecks ahead of where your true bottleneck in your process is.
Because your bottlenecks can change, right? You can go in and say, I'm not going to get a weigh fill machine, and you spend more time weighing out coffee beans to create a 4, 8, 12-ounce bag, whatever size you choose. 12 ounces is pretty standard. But, I mean, that takes time, right? And the longer it takes for you to do it, the less output you're going to have at the very end.
Well, and your true bottleneck still exists, right? So the true installed capacity bottleneck still exists. Right. So in that instance, so our bottleneck, and I believe this is correct for us, is the grinder, is our bottleneck.
Correct.
Now you can get we could get a bigger grinder and eliminate that as a bottleneck.
Or 2 grinders.
But if you took that weigh fill machine out of the equation and you started filling those bags by hand, that is your bottleneck for sure. But then you would still have to put it in the grinder. So that it's not a bottleneck, but it's still, that time is still there.
Slow, right?
It's still slow. It's still a slow point. So just keep that in mind as you're doing it. Come in with an analytical mindset and make sure that you put everything on paper and think of it as a full process and not just as a one-off roasting, activity.
Right. Right.
Because, I mean, that's what you're going to learn on. You're going to learn on a small roaster, and you're going to learn how to roast, and that's very, very important. We've already talked about how important that is. But you also have to learn how to run a manufacturing facility.
That's what I was about to say. And I mean, good or bad, like for us, that is where we worked for the last 10 to 15 years in manufacturing. So we clearly understood and knew, what it means to find a bottleneck and eliminate that bottleneck, even if it moves somewhere else. Then find out how do you, maximize your output based on what you have. I mean, those are all things that we understood going in, and we still look at it today and know, like, okay, in the event that something happens that our demand goes through the roof, we know what we need to do in order to increase our output. Mm-hmm. Like, again, we know the roaster's ability, right? But again, there's other things that you definitely need to consider.
I cannot accept an order for my roaster's capacity. Right.
Oh no, you got to accept an order for your grinder's capacity.
Right, exactly. But that's something that I think a lot of people overlook, right? And so that's the point to kind of finish this off, is to say, yes, be intentional. And I love the questions about people being intentional about deciding on which roaster to get and not following just the latest trend. But also know that it's not just the roaster that you have to consider.
Right. You'll set yourself up if you just think I can roast 50 bags an hour. Oh, great. So
I'll take an order for 50 bags.
Yep, and I have it to you within
that's 100 bags worth of work, right? So just keep that in mind.
Keep it in mind for sure.
So I think that's it for this episode. I hope that answered the question that we got. If it didn't, please feel free to ask additional questions. We like to answer and communicate with you guys. So if you have any questions or anything that you want us to cover, let us know, and we are happy to do that. But until next time, I think that is it for today.
That's it. Enjoy your Thanksgiving for those who hear this before Thanksgiving. If you hear it after, hopefully you didn't eat too much.
Yep.
But still enjoy like this end of the year holiday season.
Go buy some coffee. Check out the Black Friday deals from Cold Blooded Caffeine. And
Cold Blooded Caffeine.
Play the outro. This has been the Cold Blooded Caffeine Podcast. I was your host, Trey, and he's McKendrick. Cold Blooded Caffeine Podcast is brought to you by Cold Blooded Caffeine, of course, your source for sustainably sourced specialty coffee with a conservation mindset. Check us out today at coldbloodedcaffeine.com. Also brought to you by The Coffee Run, Charleston's local coffee delivery service, servicing Charleston, Somerville, Ladson, Goose Creek, Moncks Corner, Mount Pleasant, James Island, Folly Beach.
Come on, give us some more.
I don't know. Everything else. Everything else. Check us out at coffeerundelivery.com. We will see you next time.
We're out.